This conference will now be recorded.
So we're pleased to have with us today David Brown, and I'll let David tell you a bit more about himself and his organization and what they do. But David has worked with us in the past to offer a variety of sessions on mental health related topics. We've worked with him to offer a mental health first aid certification course, and we're so glad to have him with us this morning to talk about just some really practical topics with all of us. So Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Ready for me to start?
Yep, it's all yours. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for spending some time with me today. Just to let you know, this is less a presentation, I hope, than more of a conversation. So first of all, I always start with my apologies. First of all, as you can see, I am follically challenged. I tried buffing, so if you are looking on video, forgive the reflection, the glare. Work on that with the lighting. The other is that I am terribly ADHD, so if I forget a question or you have a question, feel free to jump in at any time. Your voice is important. I'm here for you and for the greater work, which gets in a little bit about myself and my organization. I started Echo Resource Development in 2015. It's a human systems nonprofit. So we look at outcomes, human outcomes, health, welfare, and safety, not in response, not after the fact, but prevention. And it is heavily focused on social connectedness. So our tagline is we empower and connect organizations and the people that we serve. It is really around prevention and creating healthy systems across lifespan. So we have been in existence for 5 years, providing consulting, mental health, trauma-related professional development, really finding out what organizations and communities and schools need in order to be successful, and then we build that infrastructure. But that infrastructure we all see is based on humans, not on technology or rules and regulations, which is part of what we talk about, norms versus expectations. So I'm going to get to sharing what will be our guide of what it means to be human. What are we talking about? Before we get there, let's see. Introductions. So if everyone would be here who's on this call or on this video chat would be so kind as to either put in the chat box, introduce yourself in 10 words or less. For those of you who are on the call, I will unmute you at the end of the time. Just so you know, I tend to give breaks. Everything is guided by music. So when the song stops, then we start. So take 30 some odd seconds. All right. See, so as you introduce yourself, so I'm still looking for people who are on video to type in the chat box who you are, how do you introduce yourself? And I'll give you an example of why this is important. So Bonnie Elliott, since you're the first one, you said Care Patrol of Central Maryland, Loudoun, Virginia. That's what you do, but who are you? Part of what we're talking about, it's only human, and the work and the stresses we're talking about is not our titles, not how we have become to be known, but how we live our lives. So we tend to lose our humanity, which causes more stress. Is there someone who is on the phone who would be willing to introduce themselves? Who are you? Let's see. Allison, I'm going to pick on you also. How would you introduce yourself?
Well, now that I've already heard that maybe we're not thinking about our professional introductions, I guess I would introduce myself as a mom, as a lover of nature, and someone who loves spending time with other people.
And that's put it, service coordinator, Catholic Charities, senior communities. So if you think as you meet people, as you build friendships or build even working relationships, are you only the title that you're given? And Donna Lance, lover of God and caretaker of people. There you go, Naz. I'm a country girl. Do we only want to be defined by our titles? They are important, they're descriptors, but are they you? One of the things that we know that people have shared during the last 6 months, but really over the stressors, is that there's a loss of self. Betty, passionate, nature-loving, family-loving woman who loves helping others, reading, and crafts. Again, a great example of in your work, whatever your title may be, how does reading and crafts, your love, come into the work that you do? Not only to improve the work you do for others, but to give you your own sense of greater happiness is what you do. Okay. Anybody else on the phone want to unmute and chime in? We will get there. Let's go. Ground rules. This is for all of you who have yet to jump in and participate. Life is a participation sport. It must come to play. For those of you who are on video or decide to use video, we aren't offended by your dogs, your cats, your kids. In fact, we see them, when we see them, they make us feel better. Particularly during this time, we're all trying to hide our lives, who we are. We feel embarrassed when kids run in or the dog's barking. It actually can make us all feel better if we know that we're all living a similar life. So don't hide who you are. Actually promote it. And you're doing more. And then one of the difficult things, respect differences and the need for differences. And then the next one is emotional safety is more important than physical safety. Let me come back to that. Next one is spelling does not count. That is pretty much something, a permission I give everybody else, but I have to give myself because I'm a horrible speller, and all the years I taught, it was better to give my students credit for finding my misspelling than to obsess over finding them and get stuck in that. And then lastly, it's okay to be human. So for those of you, I tried to highlight this piece around emotional safety is more important than physical safety. Anybody give an example or explain how that might be true? Where people will put themselves in physical danger to maintain emotional safety. Thank you, Bonnie, Philly, SS, Emily, and Betty for sharing more. Where do people put themselves either in physical danger or a greater physical risk in order to maintain emotional safety? I will wait. I'm here for you guys. So somebody might want to chime in either through chat or unmute and share. Let's see. The question, where might somebody put themselves in physical risk, harm, danger in order to maintain emotional safety? So to protect the family, think about things we do every day or things we may even see in the news, relationships in particular, where people put themselves in constant or persistent risk in order to maintain emotional safety. Really important to understand that we think everything is about physical safety, but that we really get stuck in about what's emotional safety. Think about relationships where someone might put themselves in emotional, a great emotional risk, if not harm. And many people from the outside don't understand. Exactly. Thank you. Abusive relationships, domestic violence. These are all very important. So in that context, those are sort of the extremes, but it's important as we're having this conversation that we create emotional safety, because if you don't have it in this distant communication environment, I would question how many of you feel emotionally safe in your work and home environment during these times. Do you feel that you not only have a voice, but that you can share it? All right. All right, here's another challenge for you. You share at least one way in which you have felt stress since the beginning of this year. Started talking about COVID-19. Obviously, more things have happened since then, so I didn't want to define it so narrowly. But share again, either by unmuting or in the chat room, ways that you have felt stressed the last 6 months. How do you feel, or how is it manifesting itself? Either for you or in your relationship or your workplace. Yes. Managing homeschooling, young kids, and working full time from home. Isolation. And that doesn't just mean physical isolation. Many times we feel alone in a crowd, and that is more painful sometimes than being physically alone. So what we know is that the impact of this emotional stress or a stress can be both physical, emotional, mental, and emotional. That should be social emotional, social behavioral. That's a term we sort of struggle with. So physically, stress can impact us. I've had my quarantine 15, probably more like quarantine 25, but also higher blood pressure. I would say hair loss, but I can't use that excuse. Emotionally, people feeling more sad or isolated, withdrawn, sense of loneliness. Mentally, and this is what you might see with some of the seniors that you work with, that prior to COVID-19 and these extra unusual stressors, that people are more confused, frustrated, they're not thinking clearly, and it may not be related to age. It may not be related to natural progression. And then what should be that social emotional behavioral is really people's behaviors are changing. And if any of you are still on social media where I'm taking a break, you see that there's much more anger and fighting and physical acting out, not just violence, but in terms of people walking away, destroying things, or sort of taking their toys home with them and not allowing other people to play with them. Let's see some of the comments here. Yeah. Not being able to have contact with family members as usual, yes. And we see this in people not being able to celebrate graduation, seeing someone who's in the hospital, going to funerals. And these unhealthy coping strategies, as Bonnie shared, can create doubt and becomes a vicious cycle. And it's, that cycle, like Betty said, is we're being away from family. They worry about you. You worry about them worrying about you. And then this anxiety becomes not just about an individual, but about an entire family, neighborhood, community, workplace. No vacation in 2 years. No tolerance. Yeah, exactly. working through this pandemic as being a dream. Sometimes it feels more like a restless night of sleep with some nightmares thrown in. Many people do have reported that they're actually dreaming more now during this time, because that is a way that the brain actually helps to deal with issues when you're in sort of that sleep unconsciousness, so that it hopefully has a lesser impact during the awake times. You guys are right on the money. So major concerns during COVID-19 and other atypical events. You guys have shared them. Loneliness, lack of control of day-to-day life, fear of the unknown, life stress, all these things you manage, managing pre-existing somatic, physical, and mental health conditions. Can anybody see a theme in these? It's not just emotional, but a loss of what? Anybody suggest what the theme is? The loss of what? That those speak to. Let me move this out of the way. It's embedded in one of those statements. Let's see, loss of control. Exactly, control and power. And the sad thing is I'm in my middle years, so to speak, is that the older we get, we don't actually like change. And change, when it's sort of thrust upon us, is a loss of control, which for many of us feel like it's a loss of power. Helplessness, hopelessness, a loss of self, because we've defined ourselves. And that's why it was important to go back to the intro. And I said, who are you? Introduce yourself. Everybody puts titles. But if that is all you are, and you lose a job or your job changes, then you're not just experiencing the change in job or employment. You're losing your sense of self. And that's where we're seeing increasing rates of depression, domestic violence, which is really interesting. We've seen a 60 to 65% decrease in reports of abuse and neglect, which sounds great, but what it really has turned out to be is a reflection of a lack of social connectedness. And without that social connectedness, we don't know how well, how safe, or how in danger people are. And then that vicious cycle continues. So here is a really important concept. Everything we are feeling in this negative is about grief, loss, and power. This is a poem that I used when I was teaching. It's really about loss of an individual, someone who's loved. But 1,000 years, you said, I look at the hand you held and the ache is hard to bear. But moving this into our lives, that we have come to expect things to be a certain way. And all of a sudden, that hand, that sense of normalcy has been taken away. And so we are mourning. We go back and look in the chat room, some of those same traits that you guys shared about, your feelings, the sadness, the sense of being alone, they parallel what grief is like. And loss, like you shared, loss of control, loss of the ability to see people we love and care about. As much as we may have hated going into the office or the workplace every day, now we miss it because it was a sense of expectedness, an expected habit of norms. Now all of that has been taken away from us. It goes back to that sense of where emotional safety. All right. Power. So this is what I want you guys to think about, is what power do you have in your daily lives now and going forward? Because we have a choice. There's nothing that endures but change. And we all say we want change, but no one wants to change. Instead of fighting against something, the best thing we can do is fight forward, is to create change. So again, in the chat box, again, for those who want to unmute, share where you think you have power now. And Will, you talk about loss of future dreams and plans. Have to recalculate, yes, but you have the power to recalculate. Share in the chat box, since it's looks like the audio might be on and off, but where do you believe, and you have to say it out loud because otherwise you won't, where do you feel you have power in your personal or professional life? Unmute everybody in case anybody, I've unmuted everybody unless somebody wants to. So if there are people want to speak. Power and discernment and choices you make. Okay, be a little bit more specific about what choices you make about what. And respond versus react. We will throw out terms, we will throw out quotes like I have in this slide, but what does that mean? To make choices about what? If particularly maybe in your, well, I would ask both in your personal and professional life. Yes. So I'm going to challenge you guys, trying not to let fear and anger, anxiety drive my choices. Response. Choices how I will respond to situations. What next steps I will take. Your power is not just in your how you respond, but how you create. Okay? What is it that you want to see? Yes, you have the choice in how you respond. We also have choices about what we want to create. And here are some of the most powerful factors that impact health and well-being. You guys can read these. We're all adults, or in my case, I'm working to become an adult. So we know that they're greater risks for many of the people we work with, or in my case, the people we work with, but also my mom, who is 88 years old. So we know that there are these restrictions. There's these greater implications for doing things the way we used to do them. But what can we do differently that gives us power, not just means that we have to deal with the new quote unquote norm? So prior to COVID-19, we know that the elderly were one of two populations who were at greater risk for suicide, for loss of life to suicide. And we see this emotional losses. They were already at greater risk. My mom was one of 12, and now she's one of 2, losing their peer networks, right? Losing their sense of self, loss of control. And then you have COVID-19, which comes in and puts them at greater individual risk, but also increases the pace in which they are experiencing loss of people in their peer networks. But we don't just have to feel sad about it. The question is, what can we do about it to create some new norms? And I've seen it in some of the media about what probably agencies like yours are doing in order to create something different. And this last slide in this group goes back to what everybody's saying: social isolation, feeling lonely, disconnected. Let me see, is a comment here? You said choices about how I think, how I feel, what I trust, preparing for potential difficulties. Okay. So preparing, if you prepare for battle, don't be surprised if you end up in a war. Certainly we should be really cautious. But what do you guys really do to create something that isn't stressful? What do you do that is fun, that can change a norm? Going to this last slide, what is it that you might be doing in your work life that is creating a sense of joy, of rejecting loneliness? As an adult, we'll say giving the finger to loneliness because we are going to increase social connectedness. We're going to do things differently, almost in defiance of these things. Online yoga classes, going out to explore new parks to hike. Yes. Part of the defiance is if I can't see you in person, and we've seen these pictures in the media, I will stand on the other side of the window. So this last one is the slide coming up. We can be the victims or we can be the vanguard of change in your personal and professional lives. Being the vanguard, being the lead of change, what power do you have? Yes, checking in more often with loved ones, with clients. But Bonnie, don't think that you have to do it all. How do you do it so when you're not there with clients or a particular loved one, that you know somebody else is going to do that work? Your power is the difference between leadership and management. Management is what happens when you're there. Leadership is what happens when you're not there. So I think we had, I can't get a good count of how many people on the call, maybe 12. It looks like 12 or so. Out of that, how many of you see with that definition, leadership versus management, how many of you see yourselves as leaders? Not because of your titles or how many people you supervise, but that you are building something beyond your physical presence. Just type in leader or manager. Leading by example. But Bonnie, do you give people both permission and the power to do things differently, not just to succeed, but to fail, get up and try again within guidelines and reasons? So we've got 4 leaders. How many of you can go home at night knowing you're exhausted, you did the best you can, but that you have created an atmosphere of trust and high expectations, that things will be the best they can be, not because you can't do anything else, but the best you can be. So Willow, you said both, depending on the situation. If you take nothing else about this, you do not have to be the victim. You do not always have to worry about other things if you've done the best you can to create a sense of leadership rather than management. And the best examples I've seen, like even in one place that I ran, is in the little over a year that I helped this organization turn around, there was one person we fired. Everybody else who shouldn't have been there left. And in their exit interviews, they said, you kept raising the expectations and we see it's the right place, but I've been here so long that I'm uncomfortable, right? They left because they wanted to stay the same. We were creating change for something better. There's really the difference between fighting against something and fighting for something. Yes, Bonnie, that's right. If you guys are really talking about getting people to make decisions on their own, it is really powerful. Even if it makes them feel emotionally uncomfortable, if people are able to make decisions that are emotionally uncomfortable, but they do it for their physical safety, what you should know is that you've really created emotional safety, and emotional safety creates physical safety. That's a good example of leadership. Being uncomfortable doesn't mean unsafe. All right, here's another challenge. It goes back to about change. Many of us, depending on how long you worked in either the field or particular place, I've seen it all 9 out of 10 times. Here's the very reason that we all are stuck and feeling overwhelmed. We have this grief, loss, and sense of power. But the other thing is that we are afraid, like we said before, nothing endures but change. We all say we want change, but do we really want to change? And so what we find is that the more we see, the more blind we become. Because we've seen it all, we don't see that the world is changing or we need to do something different. It is like, I know when I started getting old is when I started saying kids these days. Because when I was younger, my parents said kids these days because we were doing things that made them uncomfortable, but we were leading change as youth as opposed to trying to keep things stuck where they are. Right? How many of you would say that you can't wait for things to go back to the way they were? How many are looking forward to going back or, when things go back to normal? Right. Unless any of you have a time machine, there's no going backwards. There is only going forwards. And then the question is, do you want to create that change or do you want to be a victim of it? You're looking forward to feeling safer. Yes. Okay, so how do you create that feeling of safety knowing things have changed? COVID-19 is a part of it. There's a sense of unrest that people are able to speak what they've been feeling for years, some as protests, some as rioting looters, and some in disagreement and argument, and some in conversation and building consensus. Parker, when you say safer, do you mean physical or emotional safety or both? Both. Okay. And often that physical safety will come along with feeling emotionally safe, that I feel okay to go somewhere to do something or to have an uncomfortable conversation. Or when someone calls and I know that caller ID, that I wait to the last ring before I pick it up. So we've talked about a lot of the warm and fuzzy about feelings, all the things but what do we actually do with it? What are some concrete things, as Allison mentioned, that we can do to actually create change, to control where we're going, to give ourselves the power? And part of it is the power of community to create health is far greater than any physician, clinic, or hospital. The power you have as leaders is more powerful than the power you have as managers. Right? You have to create something greater than yourself. Right? And so then, okay, so what does that look like? Again, all great platitudes and quotes, but what does that mean? So here are some ones that you can use personal and professionally. Stick to a schedule in your professional and personal life. One of the biggest senses of loss is that things have changed. I don't know when I wake up, when I go to bed. And how many of you feel like you're working more now than you were prior to COVID-19? That even if you're not on site, you're never not on call. I can certainly, your work has increased. Yes. And the value of that work is increased. And so it's a bigger burden on the same shoulders. And so that gets to point number 2, is when you meet, whether virtually or in a physical workspace, meet on purpose and with purpose. If you have standing meetings and you just go over the regular sort of Hill Street Blues at the beginning, sort of run of the thing, people, that's practice and becomes habit, and people don't take it in and they don't see the importance. So meet on purpose. We're going to meet because we're going to talk about or discuss these things, and with purpose. Okay. And one of the important things is starting meetings and conversations acknowledging other people, particularly during this time. This is not a meeting coming in and a lecture, because then you're saying those people aren't worth it. It's only worth what you have to say. And Bonnie, I see you said it feels different because you are learning, which increases the stress, which goes back to these points. Particularly a lot of organizations, oh, we're going to have our, every Wednesday, we're going to have a team Zoom. And it may have started off okay, but now it's sort of this checklist of things to do. Purpose, meet on purpose and with purpose. Meeting should begin with an acknowledgement, what you're trying to do at the beginning of this, acknowledging who's here and who you are. And you have to provide time and mediums for people to share accomplishments. This doesn't have to be, a participation trophy. But people have to know, particularly when you are not in the same physical space, that you feel that they're worth something. Acknowledge change and challenge each other. Don't just challenge others, but challenge yourself to shape change. Nobody should aspire to mediocrity. It is okay to ask for help, and you need to give others permission and yourself permission to ask for help. The last point goes with the top one. It is okay to take time for yourself, even if you're around other people. How do some of you take time for yourself during the days that seem longer and are longer work days? Particularly if, for those of you who are at home, and while you may be able to take a break from work, then you have kids, the dogs, the cat, the spouse. How do you take a break from everything else? Know someone said that they practice yoga. Do you build that into your schedule though? Listen to fiction on Audible. Yes, because you can tune out the world. Make sure you have a good pair of noise canceling headphones. I think somebody earlier said going out and walking, finding new places to hike, yoga. Just like you build in lunch, bathroom breaks, whatever it is, breaks in your physical work environment, you have to build it into your personal/professional home environment. Yes, change the environment. Walk away from the desk, walk outside, breathe in fresh air. And if somebody asks you, can they go with you? Don't be nice and say yes because it's the right thing to do. This is your time so that you can be nicer to them. So one of the things that I've learned to stop doing in live sessions and even these is I don't start with, hey, how's everybody doing? Because 9 out of 10 times people will say, good, great. And I'm like, all right, let's go and tell the truth. Most people don't want to be there. They're unhappy. Something happened on the way to work or last night. Let's start with the truth. Yes. Give yourself permission to be honest with yourself first, and then with others next. There's a term called Ubuntu, and people misinterpret it because it says I am because we are. And you may have heard this in other seminars. People say, well, you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. No, you need to take care of yourself because you are important. Not because you are important to others, but because you are important. So the Ubuntu says I am, I am important. And because I take care of myself, I can recognize and strengthen my own self. But also know in parallel, sort of overlapping the Venn circles, that I'm also something greater than myself. My responsibility is to take care of myself because I am important. We are important because everybody says that we are important and we're getting in the same direction. Don't lose your sense of self. All right. All right, this is a short video. This goes to this leadership and management. If somebody can just, when I start the video, make sure that you can hear the clip. This is important about leadership is not always from the front. It is creating what we call positive social epidemics. If you haven't seen this video, it really is fun, but it is something that is powerful. Let's see.
Learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, and let's watch a movie.
Could you guys hear that? I'll start playing it again. Could you hear the volume or hear him speaking? Somebody can just say yes, thumbs up. All right, excellent. All right.
Start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out, you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So I don't know if any of you have seen that before, but that's the power of positive social epidemics, is no matter how uncomfortable it is, to get people to come along, you can create something so much larger than yourself. You can't beat them into submission. You can't beat them into compliance, regardless of what the meme is. The beatings will continue until everybody's happy. So I want you to think about what that question I asked earlier again is, what is your power to do, not just to respond or to react differently, but to create what you want. And the hard thing is when I work with companies is how many companies have mission statements, value statements, say this is what we do, but they really don't know what that will look like going forward. Well, you know, we want this, we want that. Okay, but what does it look like that you practice every day? What we call practice values. The power. This is what you need to ask yourself. And I would say start if you have kids or the elderly, anybody who's feeling down is one of the most important questions. What did you do to change the world today? And we're not talking about we cured COVID-19 or cancer or ended poverty or, you know, solve the intractable problem of racism, prejudice, and isms. But this butterfly effect. It is both for the power of you so that you realize how powerful you are as an individual, how powerful you are in your connection to others, and that you can connect, that you can empower other people. So I know it's relatively early, but can anybody think about an example of what have you done today to change the world? This tends to be a hard question until one or two people get there. So what have you done to change the world today? This fundamentally changes brain chemistry to say, I don't have to feel stuck or sad or powerless. You were kind to your husband. I'm sure he'll give you a high five for that. But it is true, those little things. If you can't answer this question, it's not that you didn't do something. It's that you didn't recognize your own power and your value to create something that's positive instead of just responding to the negative or feeling stuck. Until you can answer this question for yourself every day, you might continue to struggle. Because remember, power is connected to grief and loss. So I'm going to play this video for you guys, or this slide. So here we go. So, little David Bowie, Under Pressure, the song from from the Human League earlier. I'm going to go back to the slide. So things you can do to change the world is, yes, have a, here we go. There we go. Let's go here. Is create a schedule. Stick to your schedule. But built into that schedule have to be things like living life on purpose. Not just meeting, but living life on purpose and with purpose. If you decide you want to relax and you're taking a day off, wear your holiest sweatpants. Don't shower, whatever it is. Live life. You know, life is a participation sport. Work as hard as you play, but relax as much as you work and play. do it with that same passion or lack of passion if you're relaxing. Acknowledge your power and give people the space to empower others. So these are people you supervise. When we talk about what to do working with the elderly population, people in general, it's the terminology will change, but the reality won't. This is literally about helping people move from grief to being empowered to shifting their way of thinking and living. Providing time and mediums. You guys can read through these, you don't need these, but I wanted to, as we're coming up on the end of the hour, to see if anybody had any questions. Appreciate everyone who participated, but like I said, the things give yourself power, give yourself the okay to be wrong. Know that being human means being imperfect, but those imperfections make us perfectly unique, make us us. I don't want to be perfect. I want to be like the guy dancing. I want to look crazy until I get everybody there. That's a positive social epidemic. As an aside, my friends and I, as I head towards 50, still have one day every year that our entire goal is to make fun of each other, sort of like the movie Tag or Impractical Jokers. Those who love us aren't always thrilled, but it makes us smile.
Hey, Dave, can I chime in for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I keep messing this
Thanks
up.
for that. It was really nice to like think about things other than coronavirus for even a few minutes. I was curious for folks on the call how you feel you could share some of these strategies and thoughts with your other team members and with residents. Any thoughts on that?
Let's see. I'm not sure how the audio, if it's working really well, Allison, but I keep going back and asking these questions, I think even of the residents, and doing things that are outside the norm.
Well, really appreciate it, Dave. And I know that we are just about at time and folks have other calls and appointments to jump off to, but we appreciate this and we're really looking forward to your next session with us on mental health and mental illness. Are you willing to make these slides available so that we can share them?
I am, and if people really want, I'm always a little reluctant to give even more specific, like things they can do, their activities, and basically I just steal them from the news and things that other people have done. But if they feel like they need or want that level of specificity, I can include those. But yeah, I'll touch these up and then email them to you, and then you can share them as you like.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And Dave, thank you again. And I want to say a special thank you to the CICA Foundation, which sponsored this session and is sponsoring Dave's next session. I don't see that Nate was able to join us on the line, but he's the president of CICA, and we are really glad that they partnered with us on this. So special thanks to them, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Take care.